UNSW. And my final year was in 2005. Graduated in 2006. And I've been working in a few different places since then, both in Sydney and abroad. I went to the UK for a little bit, did a job over there, which was great. Sue Barnsley Design is my fourth job in my career, and it's been, I don't count the years, but it's been a while since I graduated, so there's a fair bit of experience there.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. For your career path, I have two questions. So the first question is, what made you want to be a landscape architect?
Yeah, so I'm sure, like you guys, I was always very interested in design and architecture, fashion, industrial design, all of it. I loved it all. I would sit in the car and I'd draw like houses when we were on road trips, and it wasn't just the house, it was like their massive garden as well. So when it came to picking my university study, I was interested in all of those options, but landscape just stood out as something very different, and that maybe spoke to a few more of my interests, like as well as like plants and gardening. So yeah, from like the backseat of the car drawing to in front of a computer and CAD.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's the same for like most of architects. We have a love for the art. We all love art, different forms of art. So there's different direction. There's architecture design and some media arts. Okay. So for the second question is, could you explain the journey about how you became a landscape architect and what attracts you about landscape architecture that inspires you to take it as a career?
Yeah. Should I go back as far as uni? Because I covered that a bit. Because I did the 4 years straight out of high school at UNSW, and I was quite young. I was a baby. I was probably only 21 when I graduated and started a full-time job at Scott Carver. Back then they were actually known as Scape, and it was a small group of, I think there were 3 of us, sometimes 4 of us in the office, so always a small team. But I don't know if you know, Scott Carver is actually an architectural company, so we were a small division of a larger group, and that gave me a lot of experience of working with architects. And I think that was super valuable because you get to see a different side of the project, but also allows you to communicate with them on different stages of the project and get your point of view across early on. After Scott Carver, I did my little overseas travel and went to the UK. It was the GFC, so it was a bit difficult to find a job over there at that point in time. But I was really lucky, and I got one outside of London, but with another small company run by a female director, and it was called Co-Design. And I was engaged on a short-term contract really to help out with this big cultural project they had in Dubai. And that was fascinating because it was all like very landscape-based, but a lot of research into a whole new environment that we didn't know, from like the plants that we could use, and also not just a different environment, but also cutting edge for them, because a lot of that work was always referenced back to Western culture. This was going to be a cultural precinct where we wanted it to be really ingrained in the Indigenous culture. So there was a lot of research, and very fascinating sort of job that was. And lots of different facets of it. It was very big. And then I came back home to Sydney and got a job with Turf. And they're a great company. They were based down in Cronulla at the time, but I think they're up in the city now. And at Turf, we did a combination of projects from public parks to commercial. Really valuable experience there. I'm trying to track the timeline. I was sort of craving another more so the work that Sue does is very specific and creative, and I saw some of her projects and I was just like, wow, like that's the sort of work I want to be doing. So when a job came up available at Sue Barnsley Design, I gave it a try, and I was lucky to join her team, and I've been there for 6 or 7 years now.
Thank you for sharing that, Georgie. So for the next part, we have Shu Yao to ask you some questions about your project.
Hi, this is Fulia. So I will ask some questions about your project and your experience. So the first question about your project: how do you contribute to the overall goal and expectation in your landscape design project?
Yep. This is a tricky question because it's hard to pick what the overall goal of any project might be because there's so many. So a lot of the time it's managing all the multiple goals and knowing which ones need to be prioritized and pushed, and it's really more about that balance between all of them. If you mean also my role individually within the company, we're very collaborative, so we do work together a lot. I also work on a project from the very early stages through to the end, so there's a lot of input at all stages. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next question is, what kind of landscape project, or to be more specific, which project interests you the most among all the projects that you have been worked through?
My favourite type of project is more of the public spaces, so parks, also cultural, as I mentioned with the work I did in the UK, that opportunity to work in a cultural precinct has really stayed with me. I think I'm drawn more to those because they are spaces for everybody. They also can be quite more site specific. They're always different and challenging. They usually also have a story that you can tell, that you can pull out and communicate to everyone who's going to use it. So I really like a project that really gives back as well. And I think public ones, all projects give back on different levels, but public ones you really feel like everyone has the opportunity to gain from it.
So about your experience, when you find it difficult to meet the class expectation in some project, how would you find your way to overcome those difficulties?
This is a common problem. We do often have different expectations from the client, or the client has expectations of us that we need to keep reminding them of, what we can deliver and what they're expecting. I always find it best to try and see both sides, though, as a starting point, depending on what it is, because the client does have insight and they have their perspective of what they need and what they want, and it's part of our job to listen to them. And so I guess also then, doesn't mean you give in. You've got your professional opinion, and you should